IGF website as well as
Absolutely. Yeah, the thing is that
Good morning, everyone. We are glad to have you here. And like we all know, this session is an inclusion session. And we are going to be looking at internet access and digital inclusion in Africa. And we are especially going to be looking at how we are taking care of the underserved communities. And before we start, we want to look at the state of internet and inclusion. So if you follow this year's main theme, building inclusion and trust, find out that if we continue building trust, we are building this internet for and not getting access to it, it might amount to effort. So when we look at this, we find out that the International Finance Corporation, in a report they released recently, found out that only 22% of Africans have access to the internet. And by the time you go forward, you find out that this information, you find out that it is not just the whole of Africa. You also find out that when you go to Morocco, they have around 84.9% internet connectivity rate. So you go down to South Sudan, you have 8%. So what are we saying is, what is causing this disparity? And what are we going to do to bridge this gap? To make sure that while we are building the internet, that we are leaving a great number of people in Africa behind. Joining me in this section to discuss these issues, to look at these issues, and as it has to do the intersection between internet access and inclusion. Boye Adegoke. So Boye Adegoke is a senior program manager with Padam Initiative. So Mr. Boye, you're welcome. Also joining me will be another professional, and Mr. Francis Asante. I don't know whether Mr. Francis, I saw him running around. So while we wait for Mr. Francis Asante, we are also going to, Mr. Victor will be joining us remotely from Ghana. So if the technical team, you can help me, let's find out whether Mr. Victor is there, because I saw him earlier on. All right, thank you, Mr. Francis. Mr. Francis. The technical team, can we get across to Mr. Victor? Yeah, I saw him online earlier. Okay, while we wait for that, I'm also going to have another person from the Southern Africa, Miss Nompilo. I want you to also join us in this section. And I'm also going to be calling on Mr. Richard from Bloggers of Zambia. Mr. Richard? Thank you. And finally, I'll also be having Miss Khadija. He's the program lead at Padam Initiative for Anglophone West Africa. Thank you so much. You come with your seat, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please, without wasting much of our time, we are going to be looking at some burning issues as it has to do with internet access and digital inclusion in Africa, considering the underserved communities. The technical team, I don't know whether we can go. Mr. Victor, if you can hear us, please open your mic, and then you can also put on your video.
Morning. Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Victor.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I can hear you very loud and clear.
Well, that's very good. That's very good. We are glad to also have you here. we'll be coming to you. I'm so glad to know that you are here. So going on, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Francis, because I want us first of all to understand this, because in that same report, we also find out that the African Union, with support from the World Bank, have set a goal of getting everyone on the continent connected to the internet by the year 2030. And I see that as a very tall order for us, knowing where we are now at our connectivity rate. And one of the things we find out is that if we don't understand our issues, the progress we've made so far, and being able to put them together to know what we need to do or areas we need to improve on, you might find out that 2030 might get here and AU will not still achieve that goal. So I'm starting with you. What are some of the challenges? Or we start from the state of internet connection and digital inclusion from your region in Africa.
All right. Thank you. Good morning. Okay, so I'm Francis from Ghana. Okay, so digital inclusion from the Ghanaian perspective. From Ghana, just this year, internet penetration is about 53%, which shows a lot of improvement over the past year. Yeah. Okay, so that means a lot has been done. But normally when you're looking at digital inclusion and access, you first have to look at the gaps. What are the gaps and the challenges? Because if you don't know the gaps, you'll not be able to make much meaningful input. So now let's see the gaps. What are the issues that people know? We are not achieving the digital equity that we are looking at. So first of all, one has to do with infrastructure. Because if a country doesn't have very good infrastructure, it makes the cost of internet very expensive. So when it's expensive, people may have access to the internet, but they can't afford it. Because looking at Ghana, for instance, I would say the cost of internet, I would say is average. But looking at the income level of an average Ghanaian, it becomes expensive. Because if you want to compare to other regions, I would say it's not expensive. But looking at the average income of a normal Ghanaian, it's expensive to afford internet in Ghana. So that means accessibility is there, but affordability becomes a problem. Wow. And accessibility, normally, if you look at the part of our regions, normally they tend to invest more in the urban areas. So they tend to leave the rural areas who becomes underserved. And this is maybe due to every investor wants a return for his investment. Because let me see, if I want to invest here in the capital city, the return of my investment, I'll get it within like 5 years. But if I want to go to the hinterland, I'll get it in like 20 years. So I wouldn't want to go there. So that leaves the gap there. So what can be done? And also, some has to do with those who are physically challenged. Because we've also noticed people are building softwares application. They don't even think of those who are physically challenged. Maybe they are blind. They can't type. We tend to build application and do policy, leaving them out. So that becomes also another gap. Mm. Also, internet in Africa got internet in the mid-90s. And I should presume it was in the early 2000s that the schools began teaching internet. So those that were born before that time also leaves another, I would say the aged, because they didn't have the opportunity to learn internet in school. So now they also left us. So it becomes the aged, those who are physically impaired, those who can afford, those who don't even have access to the internet. That leaves a gap. So what has to be done? So that is when, once we know the problem, we'll try to solve them. So maybe I'll leave here and come again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know the point. I'm going home with something here. You find out that accessibility without affordability still will not help us to build equity. That's a very, very valid point. Thank you so much. Let's hand over to Mr. Boya Adogo. Standing on the foundation that Francis has laid already, I know that both of you are coming from almost the West African region, and he has given us the Ghanaian perspective. And for sure, I know in the work you do at Paradigm Initiative, you do a whole lot of work around other African countries within the region. Can you share your experience with us along the same line?
Okay, yeah. So I think it's instructive that as it is in Ghana, so is it in Nigeria and a lot of the other African countries that you want to think of. So Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and Morocco that you mentioned are one of the few are the few African countries that have, a sizable amount of internet penetration, around 50, 60%. But as you rightly observed, when you look at those number on face value, and you don't interrogate further, you would think that, okay, some progress have been made. Like you said, the concentration is in urban areas, and since our focus is on the underserved communities, these numbers don't reflect what is actually happening in those communities. Another issue that you also find is that once you leave the city center, the rural areas, the quality of internet you get is very ridiculous for people who do work that take them to communities. So even in communities where there is internet access, so we've talked about affordability. Another issue is the quality of the internet that you have access to. I mean, we used to make a joke about why some people are experiencing the World Wide Web. Some of us are experiencing the World Wide Wait. So you just click, you click on the URL and you have to like wait forever for a site to open. So I think that's a major issue. But if you look at the landscape generally in Africa, I think we can take a look at what is happening in West Africa. I think West Africa has one of the most impressive numbers in terms of average. If you come to South Africa, for example, southern part of Africa, we are in southern part of Africa. South Africa has a very impressive number out there. But by the time once you leave South Africa, what you see in other countries in Southern Africa are less than impressive. See Malawi, for example, they have less than 20% internet penetration. So at the end of the day, what we have on the ground in Africa, it's a situation whereby a few countries have, good numbers that are good for statistics, just to show off that, okay, we are at 60%, we are 63%. But even at that, there are issues around affordability, as Riley pointed out, but then quality of access as well. There are also a lot of other issues responsible for this, which I guess as we go on in the conversation, we'll be able to speak to. But let me stop for now and allow other people.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Gogoke. You find out that what you're also to buttress your point. So you find out that most of those figures I will call we throw around in Africa are usually based on what is obtainable in the urban areas. So for example, we'll find out, like we say, Nigeria is doing well. When you go further in Nigeria, you find out that this they are doing well, less than 50%. This data that is putting Nigeria in that pedestal is just from information from only 50%. Currently, a result released by January this 2022 shows that more than 55% of Nigerian population, that is around 108 million, don't have access to the internet. So when you look at that number and find out that Nigeria is a country of some few numbers above 200 million, and 108 of them are not connected to the internet. What, Khadija, when we look at this, can you still throw more light? Because we are still looking at what like we rightly said when we started. Our goal, as AU has said, is to make sure that everyone is connected by 2030. And we all agree that if we don't identify these underlying problems, we will still get to 2030 and this problem will still be staring in our face. Are there other things that we can identify that are contributing to this?
I guess, does this mic even work? So the speakers have really said a lot of what is obtainable in most of Africa. I just want to add that when we're talking about access and connectivity, it's not just the access in itself, but whether or not it is meaningful, right? Because you can have, on the face of it, access, you can have edge or 3G, but you cannot do anything with it if it is not, 4G like internet connectivity. So whether or not it's meaningful. And there are a few research outputs out there that kind of put trackers on what connectivity, on what meaningful connectivity looks like. So in Africa, you'd find that this penetration for most of us is through mobile phones alone. And even in places that have this so-called access, people cannot afford the mobile phones in the first place. So if we're talking about being able to afford the internet, you know, maybe you can afford to buy data based on your salary, your 1 month salary, or your hourly income, but can you afford these mobile phones that allow you to access the internet? So you cannot afford the mobile phones. The access in itself is not meaningful. You cannot get, you know, these service providers, telecommunication companies, the ISPs, you also don't get constant access. You know, it's, for most of us, it comes in and comes out, right? And it stalls everything that you're doing, your work, your education. So it's not just about the figures, like Boye said, it's about whether or not it is meaningful. And I think that's something that we should definitely interrogate.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khadija. You know, from what you said, because of the level of work we do, and because of the community we work in, we'll find out with this that even some of these figures we are talking about, that most times they will say that Nigeria has this percentage of connectivity. There are sometimes you find out that one person has 3 devices, why another person somewhere in the community can't afford one. And we use the number of devices from 5 of us living in the urban area that are using 3 devices to say that this community has this rate. So you find out that that's a point, a critical point we are also going to look at. That means questioning the numbers so that we can get the real data to be able to, because if we keep working with those data, you'll find out that at the end of the day, we'll still be moving with wrong information. Thank you so much, Ms. Khadija. At this point, I want us to go to Mr. Victor. I know when I was in Ghana in March, we had wonderful conversations around the wonderful work that GIVEC is doing in Ghana. Please, we want to get your view on this, sir.
Yes, good morning once again, and thank you so much. Yes, as you rightly said, GIVEC is the Universal Service Fund, and our mandate is to extend connectivity to unserved and underserved areas in the country. And so over the past decade, what we've been doing basically is to ensure that we fulfill that mandate. And so we've been extending connectivity to the far-flung areas in the country using various models of connectivity. And so we have the rural connectivity project that we are doing. Presently, based on the gap analysis that we did some time back, we've noticed that we have about 2016 unserved and remote communities without any form of internet access. So that has engaged us, and we've rolled out an intervention to get these communities connected. Beyond that, again, there are other models of connectivity, public access venues that we term CICs. We have collaboration with the ITU and NORA and the Norwegian government to also refurbish some existing CICs that are not in good shape, just to ensure that there is connectivity within communities using this public access venue. So in a nutshell, there are several activities that we are actually rolling out to ensure that we're able to get the country connected. We are in a very digital space now. Ghana is actually moving at a very fast pace to ensure that we connect our country. Everything that we do should be digitally based. And so on that front, passports now, if you want to acquire a passport, you have to go online and get it done. If you want your driver's license, you have to do that through digital means. And so there is no reason for us to ensure that a part of the country remains unconnected.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Victor. I'm so glad to hear the great work you guys are doing. But from this number you called out now, we are trying to assuage these problems. What are, based on your experience, being that you have first-hand experience trying to get these things to the people, what are some of the challenges GIVEC has encountered in the course of trying to carry out these works?
Well, challenges, of course, I mean, funding, we don't have a bottomless pit. And so basically funding is a challenge. We would like to receive more funding to ensure that we'll be able to deliver on our mandate. So primarily funding is a challenge. But of course, I mean, the state has been so benevolent to us that just recently we'll be able to secure a loan from one of our from a partner entity to to enhance this connectivity project that we have in respect of the 2016 communities. Then again, we also have issues regarding topography. There are areas that, based on the kind of topography that we have, if you go to the western part of the country, the topography is such that the kind of technology that we desire to deploy occasionally also gives us some challenges. And so now we are, through research support, we are trying to explore other alternative strategies. And so we are also looking at collaborating with ISOC to implement community networks across the country, areas that we think that the traditional models of connectivity cannot be sustainable. We are trying to explore the use of community networks. Then again, you also have the issues of sustainability. I mean, you deploy in rural communities, but ownership becomes a challenge. The community, to some extent, do not own the project. And so these are some of the primary challenges that we are having. Of course, I mean, we are working on trying to reduce.
Thank you so much. You find out sometimes when we go out there, there are some of times we hear people outside Africa trying to call Africa a village. So, but in some sense, when you look at things, you find out there's a salient point he raised here, the environmental factor when it comes to the challenges. Then he raised another one, which I call a cultural factor. Because in my own personal experience, we'll find out a situation where a company that has the last mile contract in Nigeria was trying to lay broadband cable, and communities that were going to benefit from that project asked the company to pay a very huge amount of money before those broadband cables can pass through their community, and it was coming to them. So most times, part of what we are trying to do is to explain this, because most times when we don't consider the environmental factor, when we don't consider these cultural factors and stay at the policy level, you find out that that's one of the reasons why sometimes some of the things we bring down as solution don't work, because we don't consider everything that has to do. Thank you so much, Mr. Victor, for this point that you raised. Mr. Richard, I'm going to come to you, and I'll say we are in your region, and I'll call you our landlord today. So our goal is a 100% connected Africa by 2030. And there's a saying in our part of Africa that if you don't know where rain starts beating you, you will not be able to know where you're going to dry your body, which is the reason why we are doing this X-raying. And you can agree with me this morning that there are some points, even these environmental factors that Mr. Victor raised now. Sometimes at the policy level, we ignore those things. And that is the reason why you find out that when they are ignored, you will hear a whole lot amount of money was spent to bring a solution to a community. At the end of the day, that project will turn to a white elephant project because proper or needed factors were not considered while it was being designed. So we are looking forward to getting to know Africa so that we get to the root of these things that will prevent us from being properly 100% connected, which is the goal AU is pursuing between now and 2030. Can we get the view of what the whole story is like in Southern Africa?
Thank you very much. And the issues that you have raised are very, especially like ownership, which also my colleague Victor alluded to. It's very real in Zambia because sometimes we go to implement interventions that the people don't need or that don't speak to the needs of the people. In Zambia, we have a perfect example where a certain organization went to implement an initiative. They went to build a market because the women were selling by the roadside. But the women wanted a bar. They wanted a bar. So when they built the bar, there was development in that community. Why? Because men used to walk kilometers away to go and have their drink, and then they would spend the whole weekend there, and then they would have other families there. So when they built the bar, the men would just stagger back home, and they'd sober up. The following morning, they'll be able to mold bricks, and they built a school, they built the market, and they built a clinic. So in Zambia, we are just from doing a needs assessment study that we did early this year on access on cybersecurity issues. And all these issues that my fellow panelists have spoken to are real, especially this side of the equator. If you talk about what I'll call a Rhodesia thing, a Rhodesia Nyasaland, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. We were one country at some point. So you find issues of affordability, and it's complex when you talk about affordability, not only of the signal, of the cost of data, but also the cost of hardware, the smartphones. In our needs assessment survey, we realized that many people in Southern Africa, we access internet via the mobile devices, but also they're very expensive. And you cannot have a one short solution for Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe because the GDPs are different. And if you bring in South Africa, it becomes more complicated because they are richer. But if you look at the economics, looks like the cost of internet in Zambia is affordable. The gadgets are expensive. So affordability is a complex issue, and I think it has to be looked at policy level, where we even, for example, have to zero rate certain things, data. We have to zero rate, for example, cost of these gadgets that we're talking about, because the gadgets are expensive, and it is one of the major sources of exclusion in my country, especially when it comes to women and girls. There are issues of income inequality there. So you can say we can break down the issue of affordability in its salient issues. The issues of access, meaningful access. The further you move from Lilongwe here into the rural areas, the more the quality of the signal deteriorates. Maybe we need deliberate policies to maybe zero rate or incentives to get the private sector or state-owned enterprises to invest in the rural areas. We think that the story of the COVID-19 is a very sad story, but for us, where I come from, it has brought out all these issues that we're talking about, because we took everything online, and more than 70% of our population were left behind against the spirit of the Vision 2030 in Zambia, the Vision 2063, because education services went online, and we had an election in Zambia last year. So even electoral or political activities went online. And you could see that the rural majority, for example, were spectators in their own work, in their own democracy, because the economy also, they were spectators in their own democracy, because some banks actually, the financial technology was not even ready for this. If you look at the government, in Southern Africa, most governments in South Africa are transferring their services to digital platforms. So issues of digital skills are also very big where I come from, because we may have access to these gadgets, but how to use them? How does my mother in the rural area who needs to receive social cash transfer? So within the issues there also, there are cybersecurity issues because there are scamming, you know, there are a lot of scamming that are going on in my country, in the fintech, especially mobile money transfer, the social cash transfer, and all those. But also from our survey, the influence, or maybe the lack of it, the influence of internet law and policy is having an issue on access. Sometimes you find that our respondents who do not trust the law and the policy that is there. They actually feel that maybe it is working against them. So we find that they think that it is not making the internet resilient, that you know, the platform owners are not responsible. In the banks, in the financial, in the mobile money, they think that they are not responsible. The issues of personal data are very real there also. And we find that the majority of the people deliberately stay off the internet because they want to be private, and also they don't want to lose their digital assets. So I'll leave it there so that we can take the conversation forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm glad on the point you raised, because you came from another angle where most of us, most times we overlook it, find that either lack or the presence of law empowering people is also affecting access. Do you agree to that? So we find out that, like he gave a very good example. When we follow the other second part of the team this year of IGF, you find out that inclusion has a lot to do with trust. So you find out, and it is that law, either the existence or non-existence of the law is one thing that can help to either build or not build trust. And when we lack trust, a whole lot of people, because I can remember some years back, we were, because of the program we were running, we wanted to support a group of most of the children from the underserved community from a government program, and we wanted them to open bank accounts. And while they were opening the bank accounts, they were asked to get a debit card, and that needed a PIN. Most of them rejected that opportunity because what the information they have is that anything you have in your bank that has a PIN, someone can get access to that PIN and clean all the money in the account. So for them, they were saying, if you want to open an account, open the account, but don't give us a debit card. So you find out that in as much as this is something that can help this person, but because of lack of trust, the person is now on the verge of missing an opportunity. Thank you so much. We are going to go forward to look at, we've seen these challenges, and most of us, I'm so glad, Mr. Richard, like what you just said, the needs assessment that you conducted recently, which shows we are coming face to face with the people who we are talking about. Because most times, with my years of work with the community, with the underserved community, that's part of what I know lack in most of the policy development process in Africa, is that not only a few of them consider needs assessment before enacting those laws. What can we do at this point? because I know that there's a whole lot of work for both state and non-state actors. Because we did not come to look at these problems to just talk about them and leave them. What can we do at this point in time? Because by the session we had this morning, we'll find out that everything that is happening here is a process that is going to build into a report we are going to give to countries, that we are going to give to the AU to support that process, that is going to even go further, even as we are talking about the global digital compact this period. These are part of the things that are going to feed into it, so that our voices are going to be heard, so that processes that are going to make sure that we support Africa to the fullest are put on ground. What are the things? I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Francis. What are the things that we are supposed to be doing now for non-state actors like us, and then also for state actors, to combat these challenges that we've identified?
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I would say what the permit thing has to be done has to be a PPP, public-private partnership. Okay, so from the internet society perspective, after we've been able to identify the various gaps, as my colleagues rightly said, some people even have the access, but because of trust. So education is very key, because if the person is digital illiterate, you can give him connectivity, but they can't use it. So from the internet society, what we do is we started something we call the Next Gen ICT outreach, which is next generation, as in we're starting from the basic school downwards. Okay, so we go to them and we teach them basic digital skills, and we also go to the rural areas, because some of them, as I said, some we even have the access, but because they don't have knowledge of it, they can't use it. So we do the training. So we teach them on basic skills you need to use to be online, to use the computer, to use the internet. So that's one thing about digital literacy. After that, we do something we call community networks. So community network is an internet built for the people and by the people. If you listen to our brother Victor, one of the main challenges is ownership, continuity. At times you may spend sums of millions to build a network or internet in a community, and it becomes quite relevant because there's no ownership, because no one wants to take care of it. At times it's due to a factor like, as my colleague said here, maybe that's not what they want, or maybe what you give them, they don't accept it. So normally when we go there, we try to involve them. How do you want it? How do you want us to go about it? Because they're involved in the process. So normally we try to do it in their native dialect. So it's not always about English. It's about what they speak. So normally if you put a community network, you try to put is there an e-learning or something they can benefit on the network, so that once they go there, they get something useful to do on the network. But normally we don't use their English, we use their native language. And normally we let them name that particular network. So if it's Malawi, they'll get a native name that they can easily comment to it, and they name it by it. So if their name, they own it, they can be useful. So we did a similar project in Ghana, the northern part of Ghana. We noticed there were some, what I call villages, even access to information is very difficult, not even internet, access to information was very difficult. So we did something we call radio internet, okay? Even it's a farming community. And even access to information about their farming equipment, their season, even it doesn't even get to them. So what we did is we used Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi is just a small computer, so we place the same coordinates, a chip coordinates, and we configure them and we place them in the various communities. So what we do is you can just place a call into the SIM, and we use one of the free FM radios frequency that was available in the village to use. So once you call into the phone, you have the option to record or delete. So once you call, even as I'm here, if I'm roaming, I can call into the SIM and make a voice note. So anyone that turns on the radio is able to listen to that information. So you're able to take information across to everyone in the community. So once you turn on your radio onto that particular frequency modulation, you have access to listen to every information we're giving you. So the farming community get access to every information they need timely. So, and it was in their native language. It wasn't about English, because you put it in English, they can't even understand English. So normally, and because it was built with them, it is still working. And we have similar community network that we've done we did with them. And normally, so as I said, you have to do with them. So these are some of the intervention we are doing Internet Society. So we train them, we try to give them education, we try to put networks for them. And as I said, one thing I've also noticed, we trying to talk it's about policy. One thing that stalls the growth of internet development or infrastructure is theft. In my country, for instance, there have been several issues of fiber cuts. You try to lay fiber and they go and cut it. So normally we are advocating for if there could be a national pipeline that every telecommunication will pass through. Because today you see MTN will come and dig, tomorrow Airtel will come and dig, tomorrow Tigo will come and dig, and they are digging everywhere and they are cut everywhere. But if there's one pipeline, very secure, that everyone can, you pay to pass through, I think the theft is going to reduce because you can't be spending money repeatedly. So those are some of the intervention policies. So we try to advocate for policy change because there's no clear-cut policy about how to live, because today everyone is digging and the theft is ongoing. So we try to make, advocate for policy change. We try to train and we try to put community network for the people so that they appreciate it and know how to use it. So maybe I'll stop here for the next person. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Miss Nompilo, I didn't forget you. Not at all. And not even when I know that I'm so glad last night when you were giving me a testimony of being part of a digital inclusion program we ran from Nigeria, and she joined online and participated in that program from Zimbabwe. So for us to know the benefits of internet. So we are looking at some of the things we need to do. I know you have been on the legal aspect of digital inclusion. What can we do with the myriad of these challenges that we've identified here? What are some of the solutions for state and non-state actors?
Thank you very much, Eze. For a moment, I thought I'd come here to look pretty. But anyway. Yeah, so just as everyone was contributing, there were so many things that were coming to mind for me. I'm glad that my colleague from Northern Rhodesia is here to represent the Southern African perspective. But one thing that I would have loved also to emphasize on was the aspect of the business component of internet access. In most of our countries, especially in Southern Africa, internet access is provided by businesses, private players in the telecommunication industry. So we also need to think about the policies around their doing of business in that industry, because that has also affected access, that has affected issues of infrastructure that have been mentioned here, that has affected the quality of service that has been mentioned here. So for me, I'd want to emphasize firstly issues of entry requirements, licensing requirements into the telecommunications industry. For most parts in the region, in Southern Africa, we have seen that the licensing requirements for new players in the telecommunications industry are quite restrictive. So as a result, you find there's the same old players, there's no competition in the industry to influence even issues around affordability or to influence issues around quality of service. And then at the same time, also you look at issues of overtaxation of the industry itself. I mean, we are going digital, but I think taxation has become the new cash cow for most governments in our region. So we have seen that the telecommunications industry is also one of the most taxed industries. And that is also now affecting affordability because the cost is also passed on to the consumer. So we need to think around issues relating to the overtaxation of the industry itself as well, because I think it's quite important. Because when there's ease of doing business, I think it is also going to benefit the consumer. So that aspect around balancing operator viability and service affordability or service availability is going to be important going forward. And also, I mean, we have policies in our countries that are there to bridge the digital divide, right? For example, and in most countries, Southern Africa, Zimbabwe included, we have the Universal Services Fund, which players in the industry also contribute to. But most of the time you find that there are no clear reports in terms of how that fund is being used. So it's always important, particularly for civil society actors that are here, to also look into issues around the Universal Services Fund, because that fund is there to bridge the digital divide, to provide telecommunication services to rural and marginalized communities, the underserved communities. So we need to also lobby for transparency around how the fund is being used, also engage with the regulators to make sure the fund is being used for the purpose to which it was created for. I think that is something that would be quite important. The issue of community networks has already been mentioned. Those are quite important interventions that are being done. We have seen also in Zimbabwe an intervention towards infrastructure sharing. But while there have been so many hurdles in, I think it's an intervention that can serve as a best practice in many countries in the region. But for me, the key point that I'd want to emphasize is multi-stakeholder cooperation. Because when we speak about internet access and we speak about internet affordability and inclusion and the likes, there are so many players that influence this space. Broadly, when you think about internet governance, there are so many players at different levels that are influencing everything that happens in that regard. So for me, even when we talk about, access, you find our local authorities come into play. Are they facilitating road network for the players to access some of these communities? It's a very important aspect. When you look about our electricity supply authorities, are they providing electricity? Are they providing access to electricity, maybe for fixed broadband, for example? Right? So we also need to think around how we can make sure that every stakeholder that influences the digital landscape or that influences internet access plays their role in the system. For me, that will be very important, because if some of these players are not meeting their end of the bargain, or are not supporting the other players to meet the delivery of internet access, then we'll continue to have challenges. So that's in brief how I'd want to put it, but I'd be happy to. Yes, in brief.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was like we were reserving the best for the last. No, this is very, very exciting. Because, like we are saying, we cannot stop talking about the issues of overtaxation. In my country, we'll find out that across different states, one of the things we observed recently on the National Broadband Plan is that the states with the least level of internet penetration has the highest rate of taxation. Like in my state, I was so shocked to find out that they charge as much as 1,500 naira per meter for broadband laying of broadband lines. $3 per meter. So, and when you look at that, you find out that at the end of the day, it is the end user that will still bear the cost. Thank you so much. Thank you. Mr. Dibui, you've been nodding. I don't know whether you want to come in here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy that the issue of taxation has come to the fore in this conversation. And I think that in this room, and as you probably have noticed, the panelists are experts. Obviously, you could see the way they are addressing the issues. And I looked into the room too, and I saw that there are a lot of OGs in this space. So we are having a very great conversation already. But I'm happy that now we have, we've zeroed in on the issue of taxation. So I was privileged to moderate a session on behalf of the government of Canada. We were trying to engage the African Union. I was asked to moderate that conversation. And to my greatest surprise, the commissioner who was representing the AU in that conversation, after having a lot of conversation on the issue of internet penetration in Africa, access, affordability, and all of that, and it was his time to talk, and he said something, and I was shocked. And why was I shocked? He said, so, after everything that has been said, in his response, his emphasis was on the fact that Africa is not benefiting well from digital economy. And how did he define that? He said, oh, look at all the global tech companies, look at the like of Facebook, look at the like of Twitter, the YouTubes of this world. They're making so much money. But in Africa, we are not getting paid in taxes, to benefit from that. And I was shocked. And I was shocked because I feel like immediately he said that, my mind went back to the colonial ages when, the white man would come to Africa to carry slave, and they would give our traditional rulers mirrors, in exchange for a whole human being. Because I felt that in this entire conversation, why do you think your ability to tax the tech company is the most important? At the end of the day, like she said, this tax still goes to your citizens. They are not the ones paying it. It's your citizens paying the tax. So if we are going to benefit from digital economy, we should be talking about ensuring universal access. That is how to benefit, because when you ensure universal access, we are not just looking at a few big companies. You are able to galvanize the space and bring, and initiate the process of having even homegrown tech companies who are able to employ your citizens, who are able to create new opportunities. Why are we so obsessed with getting tax money from tech companies? At the end of the day, we are still the one paying the tax. We are not the one. We are still the one paying the tax. So I think it's very important in terms of how we are thinking of how we want to play in this global tech politics. Because what is happening in Africa is there is an obsession with taxation. We tend, and these are the policy level, we tend to think that the way to benefit from the digital economy is to tax companies. Even homegrown companies that are beginning to come up and also be, some sort of significant player at the global tech space are also being targeted for this type of taxation. And it's basic economics. No business would, take the fall for these levies. They pass it on to the consumers. So what does that mean? We're talking about affordability, for example. So if where we are today, we are talking about the fact that the internet service that we have is not affordable to most of our population, and then we are raising taxes. What that means is that even people who are able to afford now, some of them will no longer be able to afford. And those who cannot afford at this moment, they even have no hope in the next 5 years to be able to get on the internet. I think we need to get our priorities right. Taxation is legitimate. So this is not to say that don't tax companies, but I don't think that as a continent, that should be our primary, obsession in terms of the way we want to participate in the global, digital economy is by taxing. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, we set target for 2030, for 2063, but quickly let me also dwell in terms of, you had mentioned how state and non-state actors. So I want to quickly speak to the work that Paradigm Initiative has done for 15 years. For 15 years, so our work is largely focused on underserved communities, underserved people in underserved communities. And we have a program we call the LIFE program, which is basically about life, ICTs, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. We believe in the power of ICTs to help, underserved communities, underserved people to, find their way out of poverty. And we have implemented this program for 15 years precisely. And something we found out recently is that really, how many people can we reach in that intervention? So averagely every year, we're able to reach about 120 to 150 young people in the South community called the Life Legacy Program, which is a collaboration with other organizations. We have tested this model for 15 years. It has worked. And we believe that we can, spread it across the continent. So now we are beginning to, work with many more partners who are able to also implement exactly the same program. So what we just do is give them the template, and they are able to implement this program in their local community. So I'm giving that example just to emphasize that we also need to collaborate more in our interventions. A lot of us are doing great things, but we are doing it in isolation. One can chase 1,000, two will chase 10,000. So if we come together more, we've done something that is working in our local community. Let's talk to other people in other countries, in other communities, and say, oh, we've done this and it has worked for us. Why don't you also co-own the process with us and also implement it in your local communities? I feel it's important I say that. There are many of us, I may never get the opportunity to talk again. So I just want to make sure I emphasize that intervention. And I'm also emphasizing it because I want as many people who are working in the inclusion space, who are probably interested in this type of model, to have a conversation with us after this session, to look at how we can collaborate and bring this model into your community. We'll be more than happy to have conversation. And the right guy to talk to is actually the moderator, but I'll also be happy to to have that conversation with us. So I guess let me stop there. If by chance I have an opportunity to talk again, and I can see other things I have in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Adegoke. At this point, I know, like you rightly said, we have a lot of OGs. in the audience. Please, what we are looking forward to is an Africa that by 2030, as AU has set the goal, we have majority of the people, because what we are looking at today, we are looking at those people who we don't talk about most times, who are almost forgotten. At this point, we are creating room for questions, contributions, things you think we can do apart from what okay, I'm saying, can I get a second mic? Can I get a second mic? Yes. All right. So as we are, Ms. Khadija, you said 2 seconds. Yeah, before we, yeah.
I just wanted to quickly redirect the conversation towards, so we've spoken about how wrongly the priorities of African governments have been, sort of towards taxation. So, and I find that a lot of the time when we're in these conversations, we always list problems. So I just want to redirect us towards where the priorities of the government can go to, because I've seen a few influential people in the room. So I think it's necessary for us to take their minds towards what it is that they can do. And I think first things first, rather than taxing, right, let's look at investing in fixed broadband in our countries, right? Because by the time we make this investment and increase access, the money will come to you. The money will come to you eventually. And also maybe let's explore partnerships towards lowering some of the costs of these devices, right? I mean, you're in partnerships with, say, the Chinese government, for instance. I know that's, that can be. But anyway, we can look into partnerships into lowering costs of devices, look into partnerships towards financing mechanisms to get some of these devices to people. I know, like, in Nigeria, where I come from, nobody trusts anybody to maybe pay 15% now and 5% later. If you're not paying everything up front, nobody is giving you anything. So let's look at financing mechanisms. So I just wanted to.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, sir. Let someone raise her hand over there. I'll come to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. My name is Catherine Getau. I'm a retired person, so there's no affiliation. Yes, but I normally call myself an ICT elder because I've been in ICT for over 40 years. Yeah. So thank you for a really marvelous panel. And I just wanted to inject something that, firstly, I think we really need to look at the success stories, the positive side about internet penetration into Africa. Secondly, we need to look at relevance, because the internet is a double-edged sword. If I look at my own country, Kenya, firstly, people did not initially become interested in the internet. They became interested in telecommunications, and especially because of a killer app that people could transfer money, which was an issue that had, for various reasons, had become a real problem for ordinary people. And when they were presented with a solution, they did not need training and education. They did not need awareness campaigns. They looked for it, literate or illiterate, they taught themselves how to use it, and within a short time, penetration was 96%, without any special intervention from anybody. So we must create relevant applications for our local needs, which may be very different from the way the internet is being used. Right now, the other edge of the sword is coming out, because one of the fastest growing applications is betting. Betting and taking loans, which are ruining many people's lives. So the internet is not always positive. It can drain a lot of resources, not only through taxation, but through negative use. So we need our innovators to be working on good, relevant applications that are going to transform people's lives. And when we do that, and I think one of the gentlemen in a gray suit, I really liked your contribution, because we can use it for communication. We can use it for information, even using it to innovate existing media such as radio, television, etc., to pass on good information. But let us have relevant applications for our needs, and that is the best way of using the internet. Thank you.
So, like what you rightly said, one of the reasons why we are here and why we are doing what we are doing, I know Mr. Degoke also mentioned it, is by the time we hear stories like this, as a community, we reach out and find out. Mr. Francis mentioned how community networks are helping people in Ghana. At the end, why we are here is at the end of the day, people can meet Mr. Francis and find out how the community networks work in Ghana. As you're mentioning this, because we are saying there's no single method today that we are going to propose here that is going to help Africa to achieve all these things. But by the time we borrow and work as a community, we are going to get there. Sir.
Thank you very much. Ponsley from the Gambian IGF. I just want to give a little bit contribution and suggestion, because since 2021, the COVID hit the world, we all had ways in Africa, in different parts of Africa, in which we used the available digital tools in our communities to solve problems. I'll give an example. When we talk of, in terms of numbers, we have, according to statistica.com, you have 30 to 40 million, 30 to 50 million mobile phones that are imported into the continent every quarter. Out of that, 19.5 million are smartphones. So what has happened? It shows that there's a way in which affordability happens. In the Gambia, I've worked with communities through the Association for Progressive Communication that we do, my organization, Joko Labs, we do digital inclusion programs, where market women come together and they form this osusu that, okay, this month, 100 of our members will get smartphones. We are going to work with a supplier, and they will pay $20 every month for 18 months and stuff like that. So there are various initiatives like that. But one thing I've noticed is that we don't usually get, if I look at this room now, is there anyone from Airtel, Malawi? I don't think so. Is there anyone for, there's one person, okay, thank you. So I want, why I'm saying this is that we have to have a situation whereby we get our telecoms involved in the discussion. In the Gambia, when the COVID started, just on tertiary education alone, the government contacted the telcos. They said, okay, we're going to make sure that all university students get free data. You know, so those are ways to mitigate the problem, but it can only happen when we do our national IGF in the Gambia. For 2 million people, we have now 5 telcos. We make sure all of them are on board. What are you doing in the 6 regions of the Gambia? How can you help us? And if we don't get that, those local telcos involved, I'm happy Malawi Airtel is here, then I think the conversation will go anywhere. Because they are the ones that make the money, they are the ones that know that data is the new oil in Africa. Thank you.
So because of time, I think we are going to take numbers so that I think not everyone. I got 1, 2, 3, and then I saw 4. Let's do, okay, I'm trying to keep gender balance. 4, then 5 and 6. So then, oh, wow. Okay, see what we are going to do. If can we take one minute and just stick to it so that we can give more people time. So when the mic comes to you, please for just 1 minute, make your contribution so that we can get to the next person. So with that, I think with that, we'll be able to cover more persons and get more views. We agree? All right, thank you, sir. 1 minute.
Jimmy Kanja from Malawi. Thanks for the brilliant presentations there. But only one thing that I want to, maybe people can contribute later as well, the question of affordability. I think Nompiro and comrade from Zambia actually mentioned it's, that the main problem is that rural areas especially are deprived, and I think this is the essence of this discussion here. But when you look at it clearly, even from the discussion, it's very clear that actually telecommunications in most countries is privately owned. You know, Nompiro mentioned it in Malawi, so that's a general issue. Now, when you come to the question of how can the private sector contribute to affordability, actually they can have a basic argument. They contribute towards the universal user fund, universal service fund. How that fund is used, somebody mentioned, is very opaque. How do we get to the point where we can actually account for the money that telecommunication companies remit in order to build infrastructure in rural areas? Because the truth is, Airtel and TNM are going to go where people have disposable income. People don't have disposable income in rural areas. The governments basically have to take initiative to do that. How can we compel our governments to use universal service fund to invest in infrastructure in areas that are hard to reach, areas that are not economically attractive? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, go ahead. We have to go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Harira Wakili. I'm working with Center for Information Technology and Development, CETAD in Nigeria. So my comment is in line. I'll go straight to the suggestion. I think the one thing we need to do is to extend our advocacy, have a variety of advocacy approaches that we can approach the government. Looking at the Universal Service Provision Funds, which their main work is to like take connections, take access to those underserved areas. I think we as a body, we can all come together to extend our advocacy to the extent that a time will come, they will do their work, and we will not be needing much collaboration with other private sectors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Note taken. Okay.
Hello?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ibrahim. So I just want to make a suggestion about, okay, my name is Ibrahim. I'm a fellow at Article 19. So I just want to make some few suggestions about connectivity and affordability and relevance of content and application. So I just want to quickly use an example. You know, access to the internet is quite like expensive in many parts of Africa, and I'm sure everybody can relate to that. Now, talking about applications and their content, how are these content relevant to local communities and maybe marginalized communities? Take for example, WhatsApp, for example. For people in my community, for example, where I come from, Kakuri, like everybody uses WhatsApp. WhatsApp is like widely used in Nigeria. Now, but then what if we can have a messaging application or some set of messaging applications like WhatsApp that is built for local communities that works offline first, so that people in local communities can easily like use the applications to talk to each other without having to connect to the internet. And then maybe they might need WhatsApp when they are very far from their community. So I just want to stress on how communities can develop applications tailored for their own needs in their own local language. So thank you.
As part of the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Chala. I'm the regional coordinator for community networks under APC, the connector. So for me, I just wanted to address what she was talking about. There's this question about policy. And at the center of digital inclusion is policy. And for any policy to go through, there has to be political will. So how do we get our government? Because the financial is political initiatives are part of it. How do we get our government process?
So that's a question. Okay. Mr. Deboye, I think I'm going to still drop this on your lap.
Government involved in those processes. I'll give an example. So, for example, there is an advocacy we are working on, specifically in Nigeria, which aims to get the government to declare internet infrastructure as critical national infrastructure. This is because, as somebody mentioned earlier, one of the challenges we have is also theft, people stealing cables, people, cable cords and all of that. We feel that there is a lot of help that can come from when you are able to get government to declare internet infrastructure. Because what that means is that, for example, we don't debate whether people should have electricity, even though we have challenges around electricity in Nigeria, because electricity is seen as a critical infrastructure or basic infrastructure. So there is an advocacy around that. But I also think that what can also help within the context of the question that was asked is also to build in national, national strategy, national ICT policy. We need to clearly articulate these issues. Because what I have seen is that these issues are barely clearly articulated. We use vague languages that are not linked to specific actions. So at the end of the day, you cannot even measure progress. You cannot measure interventions that are being done. So, and lastly, I also think that even policy exists sometimes, but implementation is lacking. So I also feel that beyond just having, a document that is released to the public, that this is the policy, there's also a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of following up on the implementation. In Nigeria, we also use Nigeria, for example, there's a broadband plan, for example, which existed between 2013 and 2018. And in 2019, the government was about to do another broadband plan. And we have the question, have we evaluated the 2013-2018? To what extent did we achieve the goals that we set? So I think we also need to follow up with this policy and ensure that we met the targets, we meet the targets that are set. So broadband policies in different countries in Africa, the ICT policies in different countries in Africa. Some of us need to take the responsibility, because in the context of Nigeria, we were the only organization who did an evaluation of the broadband policy to say that this is the goal that was set and this is where we are and this is where we should take off from 2019 going forward. And I think that a lot of such work needs to happen, so that, because we are talking about policy, sometimes our problem is not even policy, it's about the implementation. So somebody needs to follow up and ensure that those policies are being implemented. Thank you.
So you want to contribute? Yeah, yes. I think it's something that Khadija touched on, and I missed the name. The portfolio from Kenya, what you added on to the internet, the double-edged sword, and also the issue of awareness raising and education. Quite understandably, yes. Sometimes even ourselves as civil society, the awareness and education, sometimes it becomes boring, monotonous, because sometimes nowadays, who teaches anyone how to use Facebook or how to access M-Pesa in Kenya? Because that's where the money is. People self-taught. So what kind of awareness? So there are emerging issues, I think, with the internet, issues of fact-checking, misinformation, and all that. That is our focus. But also, especially one of the issues you raised, like the internet, the dark side of the internet. It's a good thing. We agree with it. The internet is we were telling people in Zambia across the border that when you even go to the internet, you should recite that prayer in Psalms 23. As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, before you log in, because that is the internet, and we all agree. But we must be aware. In sub-Saharan Africa here, where we are, the rise, this apparent rise of digital authoritarianism. The fact in Zambia where citizens are abusing social media, citizens are abusing Facebook. So we are going to switch off Facebook. Between August 12 and August 14, at the hilt of a highly contested election, Facebook, Twitter, Messenger, Instagram, we did have access. This was a tool of accountability and participation in the politics and in the elections. Because citizens were using, for example, WhatsApp and the Facebook to compare results that were from the polling station and what was being beamed. There were discrepancies and people were raising the red flag. But because citizens were doing that, it was abuse of social media. So we must be very careful when we are discussing the dark side of the internet and where we are positioned in the world. Here where we are, I can assure you, I'm not peddling negative vibes. Our government, the previous one and the current one, have done great things to advance the digital transformation and these issues that we are doing. I can cite some things I think later on what has happened. But the story of abuse of social media, the dark side of the internet, has been used to facilitate internet shutdowns, blockages, throttling, and all this and that. And our message is that it is not a technology problem. It is not the problem with Twitter and Facebook. It is a human problem. It is you and me who populate these apps with the fake news. We don't use fake news anyway, because news can never be fake. With the misinformation and disinformation and just all this harmful content. Zambia, by people who sit in the parliament, it's done by people who sit in the cabinet. Okay? We have members of parliament, members of cabinet who have put very harmful content and they have even gone scot-free. But when it is the citizens, they shut down the internet. And sometimes when, I'm not sounding political, when it is being used, when the internet is being used as a tool for participation and inclusion, and it begins to threaten the traditional authority, then it becomes a bad thing. So that nexus between technology and democracy is challenged. And we must be very careful when we are discussing this narrative of the harmful content, the bad side of the internet, because where we are, where I'm standing, here in Rhodesia, Nyasaland. Okay, I don't know about Nyasaland, I want to go home after this. I can talk about Rhodesia. It becomes problematic, and this is where it's an emerging issue. This is what we are fighting for. Like, the internet is just there, so let us just harness it. But quickly, Chair, because I've seen you're trying to curtail my contribution in a bad way, the issue also of suggestions, what can we do, recommendations. So for us, where I come from, we always push. I don't know whether it works, because you see the internet also is more Western than it is for us here. We just go on it. And the issue of, we push for the multi-stakeholder approach of internet governance, where all of us have a stake, all of us have got a say, all of us. So when policy, law and policy are made, for example, in my country, it becomes a privilege of a clique of an elected few. What about us? So there's nothing for us without us. The academia, the papers have been done, researches, the baseline study I talked about, it fits into, it speaks to all these issues, but find that they're ignored. When the policies are made, it's only a few that just assume that this is what the people want, but the people actually want something else. So that is our recommendation. We take the multi-stakeholder approach, the views and contributions of everyone into coming up with the appropriate laws and policies and all internet we want in Zambia, in Malawi here, because we all belong to the internet. But when you go to the terrain, what we call on the ground, you find that the dynamics are different and it's not a one thing fits all. Thank you very much.
Short sentence. What they are trying to do in Africa is to throw the baby away with the bathwater, but which is what we are advocating against. There's the bathwater, there's the baby. If the bathwater is dirty, bring out the baby and throw the bathwater away. So we can't say that the internet is all good, but we won't, because of the bad aspect of it, and just discard the entire internet. Yeah. So, and we've kept Mr. Victor online. So when you finish talking, you're going to talk, but let's, Mr. Victor, I know you've been itching to talk since. I'm so sorry. So we want to get your own views on the conversations going on.
Yes, thank you so much. I was quite thrilled by the comment made by one of the participants in respect of the utilization of the funds by the USFs. I mean, this is something that has been engaging policymakers across such fora, people come up and then indicate that they've seen less work coming from these USFs. But I can speak for Ghana. I mean, over the period, a decade and a half, there's been a tremendous work that the USF in Ghana has been doing in terms of the digital connectivity that we've achieved over the period. The role of the USF in the process cannot be underestimated, and we've done so well. One of the observations that we've also seen is that, yes, we are doing so much, other countries are not, for want of a better way, let me say that other countries are probably not utilizing their funds the way they're expected to do so. So we are also coming up that, look, we need to also share best practices. What is it that we are doing that is gaining attention globally that other countries are not doing? And so we are coming up with the idea that just like the way we have the West African Telecommunications Regulators Forum, we need to have something for the USS as well, so that we're able to share best practices. And then the kind of models that we are doing to ensure connectivity in Ghana can be led by other countries within the sub-region, so that at least we are all leveraged on the strength of countries to achieve our goal. Then the issue of also spatial connectivity. Now, if you look at the changing dynamics now, Africa is becoming urbanized. And as we become urbanized, the likelihood that we might get spatial connectivity indeed by the telecom operators is actually also very real. But then look at the challenges you might be having in terms of, will I put it, the challenge that across the social demographic profile. So what about inclusive connectivity? People, the disabled persons, what are we doing to get them on board? The aging population, what are we doing to get them on board? Now you find people today in the formal sector, as they migrate into retirement, what are the measures that we have to accommodate them to use digital resources? So these are some of the emerging areas that USS and then policymakers need to look at to ensure that we bring everybody on board in the new digital ecosystem.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Victor. Thank you. Sir, can we hear from you?
Thank you. At the end of the day, the question is, we are taking the technology, but there is you are bringing in digital. Okay? So what I'm trying to emphasize is that when we are looking at digital inclusion, it shouldn't just be as a solution which can solve each and every problem. We need to look at the needs of the community. Because if you look at a human being, with respect to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you will see that the digital inclusion might not be necessarily the most important need which they might need. So you'll find that at the end of the day, you bring them fiber, okay? They are cutting fiber. We have had situations here in Malawi where telecenters have been planted, I think in 5 or so districts, but they're not being used. Why is that so? People don't see the need for that, okay? So we need to make sure that whatever we're bringing in to the community has to address the need. And to just address on what the lady from Kenya said, you would see that the mobile money uptake was easily done. Why? It addressed the needs of the community. So we need to reflect on that and make sure that digital inclusion doesn't miss out on that. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. I'm going to cite an example with what you're saying. I'm going to differ from you somehow. Because, like I said, for the past 8 years, I've been working with rural communities. A young boy in a rural community where we work in, the dad is a bricklayer. This guy circles, by the time we started the center,
closer to, the guy circles like 20 kilometers every day to our center. But do you know what happened? As I'm talking to you now, that guy, the mom runs one kiosk in one rural community. The dad is just a mere bricklayer. But because of digital skill force and access to the internet, this guy saw a MasterCard funded scholarship from that community, applied, got a scholarship to Ashesi University in Ghana, and was granted a fully funded scholarship. He is doing internship in France now, in Paris now. But do you know what do you know, like what you're saying? Part of what we are saying. But do you know what happened? The guy runs a program from there in that small community where he's coming from, with a group of his friends from Ashesi University that is helping young people in that rural community who for the next 5 years wouldn't have had access to the world. They are now accessing scholarships and other opportunities from the community because one boy got access. So when we are saying this, it's like what I said earlier on. Most times there's need for awareness. There's the way the world is going, we cannot stop talking about the power of the creates. The COVID, if not any other thing, COVID-19 showed us that. I had our brother from Gambian IGF said, if not for the internet, the universities will have closed during the COVID. Personally, in our own community, we'll find out that a whole lot of schools, about 70% of schools in Nigeria, closed because of this. But what we found out was that a lot of interventions, what we did then, because of the internet, we were able to provide data subscription to most of the kids that were in our training, and make sure that while they were at home, they were accessing the trainings. So you find out that the COVID-19 did not stop our work in any way because of what? The internet. So at the end of the day, not minding the challenges and every other thing, what we are talking about is that we will not, because of those challenges, and overlook the opportunities that access to the internet gives to those people in the rural community. Because if we don't do that, one thing that will happen is that the gap will keep expanding. And one day, like what is happening in Nigeria now, we know unemployment will skyrocket, and by the time all those things happen, crime will also increase. So not minding whatever that is happening, we won't, because of the other part of it, and say, oh, these people, what they need now is road. Right? For example, like he also mentioned what is happening. He also mentioned an example with the market women in Gambia. If these people have access to opportunities, they can help to bring water to their community. They can help to build those roads without even depending on government. I have a group of young boys that are in my community in Aba, about 5 of them that are into graphic designing. They work for companies across the world, doing graphic designing work from Aba, a rural community, not even in a suburb of the community. They do job from companies across the world. And what happened is that most of these kids now are the ones running our programs in those schools because they have money. They volunteer to train other young people. Hello. Thank you so much.
So I just want to say that his position reflects the ideology of most governments, right? And it's one of the reasons why it's not prioritized. And I don't know if that even falls back down into the reflections of the age. But I just want to make a parallel, like I want to connect the line between a lot of what has been mentioned here. So something that we've not said is the need for research in this area and the role that institutions and civil society play. a lot of the percentages that we're citing here is because of the research work that someone did, right? So the only reason we know these things exist is because someone went there to do the research. And we find that, apologies, I don't know if you're with government and with anyone who is government affiliated in the group, they make a lot of knee-jerk policies, right? Without going through a needs assessment of the people, and even when they do decide that they're going to make a needs assessment, right? They now don't take I don't know who mentioned the multi-stakeholder approach. Because if you put your people there who want to give you what you want to hear, then they're not giving you the realistic results of what is on the ground. So we should invest also in research and needs assessment while taking a multi-stakeholder approach, bringing in all the relevant stakeholders, including those who would criticize what your position is.
So much, Ms. Khadija.
Hi. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Advocate Zanyuwen Tatisesare. I am a advocate of the High Court of South Africa, but I also run a digital consultancy. So we specialize in digital laws, ICT, and training. But this particular hat that I'm going to speak about is my role as a consumer advisory panelist for our Independent Communications Authority in South Africa. And I actually think it answers a lot of what everybody has been saying in the room. One thing that I'm an African before I could even choose associate myself with South Africa alone, born in Zambia. And we do some work in Zambia as well with my private company. But one thing that I can commend South Africa for is actually doing the triple P in a manner that they've actually allocated a budget from the government under the Independent Communications Authority to get independent consultants to sit on a body. So the Consumer Advisory Panel is mandated to look at telecommunications, broadcasting, and postal services. And effectively what we do then is go into rural communities. I mean, I have literally toured the entire country in rural areas where you'll have your cell phone with you, but it won't work. Our job is to, one, physically be there to experience this, not just, see some person's report who works for the advisory panel, as you said, who's got a vested interest and also would benefit from just doing a tick box exercise to say things are working. We are there, we're the ones experiencing, right? So what we do is then we write reports, we do stakeholder engagements. Outside of that, we also, we're different experts. So for instance, my specialty is telecom, cybersecurity, data protection. We'll sit down and as the gentleman had said, we've done this in Zambia as well last year in December, in my personal capacity, but in South Africa, what we would do is we'd sit down with the elderly. Our focus is women and people with disabilities. We want to hear, what is your experience with the telcos? What we then do then is juxtapose it to what the licensee obligations are from the telcos, right? Because they've got obligations. If you look at the communications authorities all over the world, they tell the MNOs what they have to do, right? But who's keeping them accountable? The relationship between the MNOs and the telcos sometimes becomes so blurred because of that benefiting and getting money and who does what. So it needs us as people who are well-versed, who are experts to come in. But like you said, it also needs that enabling environment for the government to actually want to do so. Then we hold them accountable. We then we report directly to the chairperson of the council, Adikasa, we sit down, and then after, let's say a quarter or two, we'll ask them, what have you done? So we also require a report back from them. So there's that level of accountability, and you get nominated within the ecosystem. So it's not just because you're passionate about it. You need to have the skill set. You need to know what you're talking about from a policy, technical perspective. The entire skill set. We've got an 11-member team, and that's exactly what we do. So these are the solutions. So I hear we're saying this, but as I'm hearing this, I know that we did desktop research to see if there's similar bodies within the continent. We looked at North Africa, looked at East Africa, Central and West. And I think Nigeria was the closest one to us with your consumer parliament, where you have, that overlap where the government is actually looking at ensuring that private sector is also talking to what government is doing. But yeah, I think it's triple P is really the best way to go and to ensure that take ourselves out, put ourselves in there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Private public partnership. Thank you so much. We have just 2 minutes to end this section because other people will be using this space. What we did here is that we've ignited conversations, and they are not supposed to end here. Like, I want to use this opportunity to thank all the speakers for your insightful comments and input. Mr. Victor Online, I want to say thank you, and everyone that participated here. What we are trying to do, one of the points and one of the reasons what this forum can help us achieve is that we are coming from different regions of Africa. Like I said when I started, in that angle, I'm going to accept Africa being a village because we borrow from each other the good ones and replicate it in our own regions. So because in that area, we can function like the African village we know, where the well-being of everybody is everybody's business. So thank you so much for being part of this, and let these conversations continue. Please make out time to network and reach out. People, most of these people here, they mentioned great things they are doing in different regions. This is an opportunity before the end of the forum. Reach out and continue, so that we are also going to continue these conversations to make sure that we helped the AU in achieving the 2030 goal. Thank you so much for coming.